Welcome into Rounding the Bases, the podcast about culture and leadership with a baseball twist, more of a baseball twist than usual on this episode. And the podcast is presented by Community America Credit Union. I'm Joel Goldberg, and started to delve into some former Royals players this year and some other big leaguers, staying away from that for a while as I was getting to know some of the CEOs and entrepreneurs and influencers and leaders, and tying in all of those aspects to lessons learned in baseball. But already this year, I have had two, now it'll be three players that were here when I arrived to Kansas City. Three players that have retired: Alex Gordon, John Buck, and my latest guest, who was here when I arrived and then finished up a 7-year career in the big leagues, a guy that could do a lot of different things on the baseball diamond, also one of the more fun players that I covered. And I'm always interested in life after baseball, and we all experience those changes. And in the case of today's guest, Mark Teahen, he has moved on to a world of business entrepreneurship, the service industry, if you will, with a wine bar in Scottsdale. And I thought about this a lot during the pandemic, because now Mark was living a world that so many others were too, where everything changed. And baseball players were certainly out of work, but I thought more about the restaurant industry, the service industry, bars, everything that changed. Actually, during the pandemic, had Kevin Youkilis on, the owner of a brewery in the San Jose area, and he talked about dealing with all that. So I'm excited right now to bring in to the broadcast Mark Teahen, who is wearing, for anybody that'll watch this on YouTube, but if you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, and where else, he's wearing a shirt that says retired, but then the hat says Sorso, which is the name of the wine bar. Mark, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Joel?
I'm good. It's good to see you coming to us, I believe, from your home in the Scottsdale area. And the first thing I want to ask you is, what has life been like post-baseball? It's been a few years since you retired. We saw you actually at Kauffman Stadium, but it's a big adjustment, I think, for guys that have done nothing but play sports their whole lives, and now you got to go live a quote-unquote normal life. What was that transition like for you?
Thankfully for me, it went pretty smoothly. Right when I retired, it was 2014 spring training, and I went over to Italy to look into playing over there, just because I'd heard about the league, and no one really cares about baseball too much over in Italy, but it was, I'd prepared to play in that season. So I was like, well, might as well go look into it. My wife and I took a trip about a week after I got released in spring training, and played a little baseball while I was over there, hit here and there, but then kind of found this wine bar concept and came back to the States and literally Googled business plan and just started plugging in things. And about a year from that spring where I got released, we were opening Sorso Wine Room. And I don't think my wife wanted me to have idle hands and just kind of jump right into something. So I think it worked out well, a quick transition.
So, this isn't something like I think, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think every ball player, you could so often be in the moment, and the moment can be so good and frustrating at times. Baseball is a sport of failure, but to actually sit down and say, what am I going to do in this ends? I think every ball player knows it's going to end. I certainly hope that they know that, but it can be hard to think ahead like that. You weren't thinking while you were playing in the big leagues, I'm going to own a wine bar or be in the service industry, were you? No,
not at all. I do think it usually ends for guys earlier than they plan on it ending. That's why I tell young guys, enjoy every moment, because it unless you go on to be a superstar, baseball is going to decide when you retire rather than you decide when you retire. So, my wife and I always talked about running a business together once baseball was over, but never knew exactly what that would be. We were fortunate, playing ball, to visit a ton of cool cities and have a bunch of awesome dining experiences. So we had a passion for it, and wine. I remember first time I went to Napa, we had a day off in Oakland. So Gil Mesh booked a car for us, and I think it was Kyle Davies, Brian Bannister, Gil Mesh, and myself, and all of our wives, or my wife was my girlfriend at the time, but went up to Napa and, fell in love with the whole area and the whole experience. So had a passion for it, but never thought, down the road. And to be honest, as we went through the process, we did the business plan, when try to find the perfect space for the wine bar. And as we went through it, I was kind of like, well, this is good to go through it. We probably won't actually dive into this endeavor, but it's good to go through the process. And then we found the right spot and we're signing a lease and we're like, okay, well, now we got to figure this out as we go.
So what year was that?
That was, we opened in spring of 2015. It was honestly opening day of 2015. We were opening Sorso Wine Room. So it was a quick turnaround from a baseball career, but I think that was actually really good too, because that spring I wasn't sitting at home, thinking about what I was missing. I was more, trying to get this business open.
Yeah, it happened quickly for you, and that's a lot of years ago now, and you're still going. I do want to talk about the pandemic and how you survived it in just a little bit, but I want to go back to that point because in one sense, you had some help in terms of you played at the right time to make some money, and I don't want to understate or overstate that, but you played in this game long enough to have been able to actually get some legitimate paychecks, not the minimum salary, which I think most people, you included, would admit that the minimum salary in baseball is still a pretty damn good way to live life. But if you can hit it right, you're talking about millions of dollars. So you had that going in. With that said, you could throw that millions away real quickly. I mean, you could jump into any business venture and probably have the ability to do that with the type of money you made. But we're not talking about the money that guys can make with the hundreds of millions and all of that type of stuff, where you can afford. It's like I would call it like Yankee money versus a smaller market money. There's a limit to all of it. And so I'm just curious what that process was like. Maybe if having some of that success financially helped you start, that didn't guarantee anything. So how were you able to get beyond that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure a balance. And like you said, I think my agent did a great job of maximizing my arbitration years. And then when I got traded to the White Sox, I got a 3-year contract, which was great, especially because I got hurt in my first year of it. But yeah, the financial stability allowed us to open the business and also allowed us to not need to pull a paycheck off it right away. I mean, a lot of restaurants fail because, you got to be making money right away. And for us, we were fortunate to just be able to get it going and do it right and not necessarily have to, be pulling money out of the business every month. And now, we're over 6 years in, and it's without the pandemic being involved, we were tracking on the, they always say about 5 years in, you can kind of look at your business and say, okay, what can I, assume I'm going to make off it each year. And we were definitely to that point. And then the pandemic, threw a whole wrench in things, but yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously it's nice to go into a business venture where it's not your only source of income and it's not, 100% paying for, my family of 5.
Yeah, you do. You have that growing family. I knew you when it was 2, you and Lauren,
yeah.
and now the kids are, of course, like everybody else, getting older and bigger and all of that. But I think that for you jumping into this, I mean, you talked about it, it filled a void right away. I'm always fascinated by this because it doesn't have to be a sports thing necessarily either. When you stop doing something you love and you've done it for so long, it can be hard to replace that. It can be hard to fill that void. I mean, I've broadcast for 26 years. There'll come a day where I'm not doing it anymore. And there are elements that maybe you don't miss of it, but at the same time, it's all you've known too. And so how much did jumping right into that business fill that void, and how did you replace the competitiveness? I've rarely met a big leaguer or a professional athlete that isn't the most competitive person that I've ever met. And now this is a totally different world for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge adjustment. I mean, baseball, you go to every day, compete at least 4 times I guess 3 some days. But head to head with a pitcher and every play in the field. And I mean, it's a hugely team sport, but it's the most individual team sport out there. So, I mean, that drive and that feeling you get as you're stepping in the box to compete, it's hard to replace. And I think it was good because it kept my mind focused on, getting a business started and opening day of the restaurant was almost as exciting as some of my opening days, because we put a lot of, effort and thought into our restaurant and really wanted something that everybody would really enjoy. And, we're like, oh, we have a ton of friends in the Scottsdale area, they'll come support it. But you realize real quickly, your friends aren't going to sustain a business. So thankfully we opened up and people embraced it. And, we've tried a lot of things along the way, and the concept has continued to develop. But some of that, it's kind of fun, just like in baseball season where, you go in a slump and you're trying to figure out, what I need to do to get back on the right side of it. We've had ups and downs with the business, and it's not the same as competing on the field, but it definitely fills that void a little bit.
Have you become, I don't know that connoisseur is the right word, maybe you have, but where are you at in your knowledge of wine today in 2021 versus when you went over to Italy before this idea was hatched?
Well, I joke with my wife, Lauren, that when we first started dating, she was big into, I'm sure it's still around, but it's like a blue bottle, and it says relax on the side, and it's Riesling. It's basically, fruit juice that has some alcohol in it. But that's where we started. And so, of course, throughout the whole process, the first couple of years of opening Sorso, like building the wine list was a whole process. We have over 150 wines on the list. We did have to check ourselves a little bit because, wine reps come in, they want to have you taste this and taste that. And so initially we were there pretty much every day, but we were tasting wine far too often also. So we had to reel it back and be like, okay, we'll do it once a week. And, but it's been fun. Wine's one of those things that's awesome because you think you know everything about it or know a lot about it. And then the next year's vintage come out and it's back to square one. But I don't know. I definitely don't want to insult any sommeliers and act like I'm in that realm. But just, being able to taste wines from all around the world, it's been pretty cool and educational, and it's been fun.
Well, and I got to think too, and I don't know where you're going with this, or maybe you have an idea, but if this is something that you guys truly have a passion for and love, and I'm guessing that's the case if you've been at this now for as long as you have, you could do this till the end of time, till the end of your time. This is not something that has an expiration date, I would imagine. Is that the hope, to do this really long term?
Yeah, I think so. We signed a 10-year lease when we first opened up, and we're almost to the 7-year point of it. And I think we'll continue to expand. We've got a great following, and the business is going well, even, through the pandemic. We're fortunate because we've got, I don't know, someone asked me about the similarities of baseball and running a restaurant. And I think one thing that helped me was, with baseball, you're playing with guys from all different backgrounds, all different cultures, and it's just a melting pot of people. And the restaurant industry isn't that different in that sense. You got people, passing through, or people that, we have a girl that's been with us the whole time, and she's got a son and pays her mortgage, based off what she does at Sorso. So it's just a melting pot, and it's cool because I think baseball helped Lauren and I just understand a bunch of different cultures and different backgrounds, and be able to relate to a wide scale of people. So, I think in that sense, baseball helped us, even though it's a completely different industry, but helped us kind of roll into it.
Well, and you were a jack of all trades type of player too. So there were a lot of different roles, whether that was as a starter, whether that was a guy hitting home runs, whether that was a guy stealing bases, playing third base, playing outfield, playing first base. I think there was some second base in there too, if I remember correctly, right? So yeah. Probably what did you play at? Just about every position, but catcher and shortstop, maybe?
Yeah, I think I had 4 opening days in a row where I was a different position. I think I was third, left field, right field, and then second base. Second base only lasted, I think, 1 series, but
I remember that.
Yeah. But yeah.
I remember that actually. I remember that off day in Oakland too, because I think I ended up in Napa as well. I was not invited by. It was one thing for those pitchers to invite a position player. They were not going to invite a broadcaster. I'm pretty sure about that. But I believe that my director, and I feel like that was 2009. I might be wrong on that one, but
yeah,
I'm thinking of who I went with and all of that. But anyway, how much having all of those roles in baseball, you weren't the superstar, although I think there were some points where you fit into that category in terms of expectation, and other times where you're coming off of the bench or moving all around at a time where, nowadays you see guys moving around in positions regularly. But I don't know that as many guys were doing that like you were then. Does that carry over at all? I mean, what type of roles do you have at the wine bar?
Well, yeah, I guess I was a trendsetter in playing a few different positions or whatnot. But I do say, like, watching games now, I feel like I can relate to any guy on the roster because I was drafted supplemental first round, so I was a prospect, but my first couple of years I didn't do a ton in the minor leagues, and then I had a great year and ended up getting traded over to the Royals. But I went from the prospect to the rookie to in 06 I had a good stretch where I was a good player. But then later on in my career, I found myself coming off the bench and trying to be. I remember being in the infield thinking, "Oh, the outfielders got it so easy," and then I became an outfielder and I was like, "Oh, this isn't easy." And I also remember playing every day thinking, "Oh, these bench guys got it easy. They only got to play once a week." And then I got into that role and realized, really any role on a big league roster there's not an easy role. You earned your way there and you got to perform, and every role's different. But yeah, I mean, I guess relating that to the wine bar, I mean, when we hire a GM, we try to tell them, just like Lauren and I figured out, when you're the owner, you need to be the best cook, the best server, the best host, the best busser, the best dish guy. So, early on, I found myself doing all those roles. I mean, thankfully at this point, the business is established and we've got a great staff to where I don't have to be there every day. But also when I go in there, I want to make sure that I'm setting the tone or, showing people how it should be done. I don't want to walk in there and look lazy and them assume that's the norm.
So before I get to my baseball themed questions, I want to ask you about the pandemic and the website for anybody that's interested, sorsowineroom.com. And in looking at the website too, I see order online, food, wines, market, sellers. So I don't know what it looked like beforehand. I know that so many in the restaurant industry had to change the way they were doing things. And many of those that did make those changes have survived. I think it's fascinating. Like, for instance, for me, right across the street or right down the street from my house, there's a gas station. Okay, whatever. Suddenly in the last year, there's been a food truck that has permanently located there, and they're always busy. And this was a guy I've talked to him that had restaurants, and he changed, and now he's got 4 food trucks, and he's, all the Yelp orders and Grubhub and all those type of things. So how did the pandemic change what you were doing?
Well, like I said, right before the pandemic, we were trending and, we're having our best November to date, best December to date, best January to date. And then of course everything happened, and I credit my wife a ton because our kids were on spring break. So we were out in California, and I remember, the beginning of it, and we're like, oh, great. Like maybe they'll delay school 1 week and we'll stay in California another week. Just like anybody, we didn't realize the big change it was going to be. But then we really quickly realized it was probably going to be an extended shutdown, and Arizona shut down, I think about as early as any other state did. And my wife decided, she was like, right away, look, I've heard of one other place doing this. A restaurant turned into a grocery store, because people are starting to be afraid to go to the grocery store. So we talked to our food reps and found what foods we could get, and we started making grocery kits. And sadly, we had to tell all our staff, hey, it's not safe to come in. You guys stay home. But we started a tip pool, like a chip sharing thing. And people, I think initially, because people didn't know, nobody knew how long the pandemic would last. So a lot of people started getting their groceries from us. I mean, we shut down. We weren't doing any to-go food or anything. We weren't allowed to, but we were doing the grocery thing, and people were extremely generous with their tips. And we were able to still keep most of our staff with some money in their pocket. It wasn't a complete, stop of money. So, we became a grocery store for about 8 weeks, and Lauren and I and our GM and one cook were basically in there the whole time. And then, Arizona has slowly kind of started reopening, and we started doing some to-go food and things like that. But it's been a long process. I feel Arizona has been a little more lenient than California, and we've been out to California, and I feel terrible for some of those restaurants out there, because at a certain point, people were extremely generous for the 8 weeks we were shut down, but at a certain point, if you're shut down much longer than that, what can you really do? But we were able to find ways to keep a little money flowing through the door and keep some money in our staff's pocket. And I'm happy to say that at this point, we actually have more staff today than we did pre-pandemic. So we're very lucky.
There's a very simple message here. It's not easily achieved, but it sounds like it's what you did. And I've seen just through this podcast, all walks of life, all types of businesses survive with this. I did too. I mean, I was out of work from baseball. I get paid by the game. And I started diving in with my speaking business. And I basically said, who can I go out there and help? And forget about what it's going to cost or lower fees or even no fees. What can I do to help? And it comes back. It's not even a karma thing. It's just taking care of people, whether that's your own people and your own staff doing as much as you can, or whether it's, the expression everybody uses now is meeting people where they're at. And so if it wasn't okay for your customers to come in, what can you do to still provide something for them? And to me right now, this is the period right now where you see the benefits from that, because I think that what happens during during a tough time like the pandemic or any slump in baseball for that matter, we all go through downs, is how do you react during the tough times and how are you able to be there for people? And I imagine that there's a rapport and a trust, just like you would in a baseball clubhouse when you're picking a guy up, that translates later on. Did you see that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, of course, there's those situations where we had a couple of staff members that we, made sure they had some money throughout the whole shutdown. And then it comes for their first shift to return once we're back open for business and they don't show up. And, it's going to happen like that. But more often than not, like the bulk of our staff was, thankful for the support we were able to give them during, a crazy time. And they've come back and continue to work hard. And like you said, I think just with patrons as well, like we try to be real active on social media and stuff like that. And with the groceries thing, just keep stuff going. We actually, we started doing trivia on Wednesdays where we would just sit here and, people could come to Sorso, buy their wine, and then we do trivia, but just keeping engaged with people. And, I think it definitely did help. It helped. We've got a few people reach out and just say, hey, that gave me something to look forward to during those weeks where, we're really couldn't do anything. But business-wise, it has come back around. I mean, our last couple of months, we obviously just finished June, and it was our best June that we've had of our 7 years of business. So I think, people are excited to get back out, after being home for a year. But two, I think people realize, we were doing everything we could to keep people in the right frame of mind or, offer some kind of entertainment throughout the pandemic. So they, want to reward that by coming supporting the business now.
Good stuff. All right, let's get to the baseball themed questions. You did have 67 career big league home runs, whether it's something on the field or off the field. What's your biggest home run as some type of a professional?
Well, I'll stick with baseball for the home run because I actually looked it up because I was telling my kids about it, and I don't tell them too many stories, but this one I had to tell them. But Cliff Lee, we were facing Cliff Lee, and I think it might have been Emil Brown was hitting ahead of me, and there are guys on like second and third. So I don't know if they intentionally walked him or just pitched around him to get to me for the lefty-lefty matchup. And they had a mound visit. I dig in, first pitch of the at-bat, little cutter in, and I put it in the fountains. And it might have been, I didn't have too many that went in the fountain. Most of my homers is like just over the fence. But it was my one grand slam of my career. And after the game, Mike Sweeney actually got a snorkel and went up, and I don't know if it was the ball I hit, but he found a ball in the fountain and brought it down to me. So it was a pretty cool memory. Yeah,
that's a great memory. The grand slam, not too bad. Okay, how about a swing and a miss, and what did you learn from it?
I probably should go business, but Buddy Beller's our manager, and we were in Cleveland, and he had just kind of come over from being in Cleveland. And Sabathia was on the mound, and this is, he was great for a long time, but he was in his prime at this point, throwing, high 90s or whatever it was. But he threw a fastball like up and in. I think it was 0-2 or something. He threw a fastball up and in, And I was like, oh, okay, he's just trying to intimidate me. Here comes a little slider away. So I kind of got on the plate and dove out there, and he threw a perfect fastball on the inner part of the plate. And I defensively swung through it, tried to foul it off and swung through it. And I go back to the dugout, and it must have been my first or second year. I look back, I'm like, I'm not sure where I got so cocky. I don't have that anymore, but he's like, well, he won't be able to spot up like that, every time on you. And I was like, well, I'm not going to swing and miss at it every time either. I was so cocky, and look back at it. It's a good memory because I realized just how confident you need to be to play in the big leagues. And, I had that at that point. Obviously now being at home, parenting 7 days a week, I'm not as cocky as I once was, but.
As you were talking about that, I went back because I'm a baseball nerd. I love finding these things. And so I did go back and find your home run, September 22nd, 2005, Kauffman Stadium against the Indians. Thankfully, you knocked in 4 of the team's 6 runs. Unfortunately, you lost 11-6. The starting lineup that day for your Royals, you were batting 8th. How do you batting 8th? You were a young guy still, playing third base. And it was not Emil Brown who was on base, although he was batting in the 3-hole in right field. But 4th inning against Cliff Lee, Matt Stairs leads off with a single. We're going to station here. Angel Baroa, single. John Buck, single. So there's your bases loaded. Justin Huber, strikeout. Mark Teahen, home run. Fly ball to center field, right field, it says. And everybody scores. And that was it. So.
Well, I guess the intentional walk was wrong, but yeah.
Well, it's funny how that happens too, because you think you have something in your head, and it's been there forever. I shouldn't have told you that because it might change the story, and it's fun when the story is what's in your head. But
next time we'll get it right. I didn't know Bucky was on first, so that makes it even better.
yeah, your buddy John Buck. Last baseball themed question: small ball. What are the little things? Let's focus on Sorso, because this has really been the big question for me. It's what I wrote a book about, because there's so many similarities to playing small ball, bunting, defense, stolen bases, all the things that don't show up like the Grand Slam does. And I know how important that is in business. What has small ball been to you with Sorso?
I think it's just paying attention to detail. I mean, I feel like small ball was what made me sustain a career in the big leagues. I was able to put a bunt down if I had to, or I was able to, take an extra base if the ball was in the gap and the guy, I knew he didn't have a great arm, or, just the little things, running the bases hard. But same thing with the business. I mean, making sure you notice the small things, and, just like they say in baseball, there are no small things, which I guess remains true in the restaurant industry. But just little things that people, you have so many people come through the door, you don't know who's going to recognize what, or notice this detail. And that's one thing that I think my wife and I have noticed is no matter what people you hire, and we have a fantastic staff, but we still see the business differently because we're it's our passion, or it's our brainchild that's kind of come together. So I just think the details and making sure that everything is touched on, and you don't just leave things, to figure themselves out.
All right, we're going to wrap it up with 4 quick final questions as we round the bases, kind of lighthearted, because I don't even think that I've really set you up with a grooving you a good pitch to show off your sense of humor, your sarcasm, which was always a joy to be around in a sort of subtle, not quite as dry as, say, an Alex Gordon, but always very witty. I know that hasn't gone away, but actually I'll start you with one that everybody probably asks. Favorite wine?
Oof. That's a tough question because, you get some different wines to try, but currently I really like an Amarone, and I touched on going to Italy, but I end up 3 years after I retired, a team called and said, hey, you still interested in playing? And I was like, sure. And basically my wife talked me into getting back into at least good enough baseball shape to get over there and play. And so we spent 6 months over there and played a season, and it was awesome. But we were really close to the Valpolicella area, and Amarone is like the high-end wine of that area, and it's a whole different process to make that wine. But if you get the chance to taste an Amarone, I'd definitely go for it.
All right. Second question, as we round the bases, real simple. Sorso, tell me about the meaning of the name.
We were in Italy at a wine bar that kind of was the inspiration for Sorso, and we self-educated our way through all Italian wines and started talking about this business idea. And we started Googling various words that we thought, hey, what would this translate to in Italian? And so sip translates to Sorso, and that honestly might be the one detail of the business that was established on that day when we were drinking too much wine and sustained throughout the whole business being developed. So yeah, Sorso means sip, or it can also mean gulp in Italian. So
okay, all right. The third question, this is where I guess I have to bring in the humor. I think that as announcers, one of our favorite things to talk about with you was, and forgive me, I don't even know if she's alive anymore, but I forever think about her whenever I hear about either Yucaipa, California, or I hear about ash bats. And it was a running joke forever about your grandmother, because you always reminded us too. Fill me in on that. And it was truly a lot of fun.
Yeah. So my mom's mom, my grandma out in Glendora, California, she is still with us. She's 98 now, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah. But her and my grandpa had the best sense of humor. So I think it was you or Ryan interviewing my family, and I think Grandma was there, and they downtown Glendora has these beautiful ash trees that line downtown. And I don't know what my grandma brought up, but something about my grandma's ash trees. So it might have been the highlight of my career for her. She was able to tell some jokes, but.
So yeah, because I don't know how many times and she's probably sitting back home. That's right, it was Glendora. I know you were from Yucaipa, but yeah. But I think anytime that Glendora or your grandmother or ash bats came up, we're talking about grandma's ash.
Rightfully
right?
So. Hopefully that is still sustaining on the broadcast.
She had more airtime than anybody else's grandmother, I think.
Hopefully that continues. She deserves it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last question for you as we round the bases, the walk-off. If I were to, I said this to our buddy Billy Butler when you guys were out doing a charitable thing a couple of months ago. I was just trying to put it on a tee for him. Like, if you were to step into the box right now, could you? And I expected him to say, I could hit a home run and blah, blah, blah. I think he didn't bite on it as much. If I were to put you in a batter's box right now, facing 98 or 100, everybody's throwing 100, how would you do?
I feel like my career kind of made a quick exit right as soon as everybody started elevating in their velocity, and all the righties started throwing cutters in on lefties, which I think is garbage. I was big into that 88 sinking away from me. So, of course I've got pride, so I'm sure I would line a double to the left center, but if they elevated the fastball at all, I'd be probably sitting down in 3-4 pitches.
Well, we'll never know. Well, maybe we could. I don't know. But either way, the life now is in the wine business, Sorso Wine Room. I have to say, I know I told you this when I saw you in person, but it's still funny because I hear your voice and, again, the humor all of the time. But after you got traded to the White Sox, my nephew, who is a diehard White Sox fan still to this day, and he was about to be bar mitzvah. This is what happens to, when you got a last name like Goldberg, although he's not on my side of the family, but you know what I mean? And so I was putting a video together with a bunch of shout outs and this and that. And because I wasn't going to be there, because I'm never at a family event if it's during baseball season. We all know this if you're in the baseball world. So I was going to have to send a video. And so I went over to Glendale, about 20 minutes from where the Royals train, and got to the end of the White Sox training day. And I did a little video with you for a shout out, which he thought as a 13-year-old, it's got to be the coolest thing to have a member of the Chicago White Sox shout out at him. And I said to you, what type of uncle am I to not be there for this bar mitzvah? And your response was pretty garbage. And that's all you said. It just delivered pretty deadpan. And for years since, once he grew up, he became my partner on our fantasy baseball team. Usually we're pretty bad. and our name for years has been Pretty Garbage. So I see that, and I hear your voice every single time. You're the namesake of Pretty Garbage.
Well, I love it. I'm glad I made an impact in some way.
Just a very meaningful way as well. Hey, Mark, it's great to see you. It's great to catch up. Congratulations to you and Lauren on all the years of success with Sorso Wine Room, for surviving the pandemic. And at some point, I'll make my way over to Scottsdale. It's a far ways from the quiet areas of Surprise, Arizona, but I could probably hop on the highway and come have a glass of wine.
Sounds good. Let's set that up.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Mark.
All right. See you, Joel. Thank you.